Hello and welcome to the Michael Mama Show, Ancient Secrets Revealed. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. Um, so today, I think this is a really important, even pivotal concept. And it's quite simply, it's so simple, yet it's so incomprehensible. What does that mean? Well, it's just so simple that everything arises out of one thing, unified field. Now, I can understand how there was a time when people who were more intellectually oriented may have a hard time with that. What do you mean it all comes from one thing? And then they go, oh yeah, that's God. But if you try to employ any rigor in the understanding of that, it doesn't really make any sense, but it's kind of beautiful. But these days with the unified field and everything's coming out of that one thing, and the mathematics of it is there in different forms. And that one thing, as Swami Muktananda said, is consciousness. And even some modern physicists the more they study the unified field, the more they decide that in fact what it is just pure consciousness. And then to say succinctly, consciousness, its very nature is to be conscious. If nothing else exists, what could it be conscious of? Itself. This is before the manifestation of existence. Consciousness becomes conscious of itself and perceives it as other, like brushing your teeth in front of the mirror, and the side mirror, you catch your own reflection for a minute, you think there are two people there. It's kind of like that. So two is born out of one. Consciousness becomes aware of those two things, takes a step back, looks at those two things, now you got three things. And it just cascades out into infinity in a very mathematically precise structure. And it's just that simple. Everything is just born out of oneness. But why is it so incomprehensible? I mean, it's simple, really. Why is it so incomprehensible? Well, we could get into the evolution of species, but we really don't have to do that. I want to keep it simple. The structure that gets created by that self-interacting dynamic that just reaches out into infinity, one becomes two, becomes three, becomes 10, becomes 100, becomes a million, becomes infinite. And it's all self-interacting. Consciousness becomes aware of that. Consciousness becomes aware of that. And so it's highly complex. And you can perceive all these different structures within it. Kind of like with mathematics. It's just a number line, but you can see all sorts of different structures and operations in it. Multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. It just goes on and on. And so you see all these different structures within it. And so there are two components there. One of them is that we all sense who it is and what it is we are. We sense it. The perception isn't completely clear. It's just a sense. What do we call that? Well, we'll call that, some people will call it the soul. You feel your soul. And also you know that it's something very precious. The self. We protect the self. But how clear is that sensing? How thoroughly is it understood? Especially when we've developed with our own lives, our own sort of like a rule book, our own paradigm identity, how we view the world, how we navigate those waters, sort of the concepts and the feelings. See, because concepts also is not just raw intellectual concepts, it's also feelings that we have that are part of that paradigm identity. And we try then to metabolize, rationalize, intellectualize, understand everything in terms of that. but it's limited because the whole complexity, the whole thing is incomprehensible. It's so simple, yet it's so incomprehensible. And so we cling to one little paradigm identity, and that's the world that we believe in. Now, I talked about that church that's down the road. It's on the way to the grocery store from Mount Soma. And I'm going to stop there sometime and talk to the minister or pastor or whatever, because he puts up these quotes. I really enjoy them, and he changes it pretty much every week. And the latest one said something to the effect that God's light shines through any darkness. And, on one level, within a simple little paradigm, oh, that's beautiful. We have God and, he's all loving and no matter what, he's there for you and all this stuff. And that's beautiful. But see, that's the beauty of all these Bible quotes is on the surface, they may seem kind of simplistic. And I think that's why it kind of turns off a lot of people now to Christianity in general. It's because it's like almost too airy-fairy, God loves you. I mean, what does that mean, to a skeptic, and Jesus loves you and all this stuff. But if you take a look at those Bible quotes in context of a deeper understanding of the nature of existence, then you can get a deeper understanding of what they mean. So like God's light shines through any darkness. Well, what's that about? Okay, we have consciousness. Consciousness creates a structure by interacting with itself that wells up and manifests all different levels of existence, but it's so complex that even the human mind can't fully comprehend it. It's incomprehensible. So we cling to little viewpoints, little perspectives, and everybody has their own. Every religion has their own. Little cliques, people. Some people look at things as pure science. Other people look at things as music. And in terms of music, it's how their minds work, That's a paradigm identity. It's how your mind works. But it doesn't grasp the totality because the totality is incomprehensible. It's too vast. And so what that does, you see, is it creates a limited perspective, a limited understanding of the nature of life. And that limitation is darkness. There's levels of understanding, insights. Okay, we can all feel our self, our sense. We know that it's precious. Some people would call it divine. Other people would say, oh, I feel it. And it also feels so universal with everything. So it's a oneness. But how complete is it? How full is it? It's not. The whole thing is incomprehensible. So there's a darkness component. Even to worldviews that on the surface might seem very beautiful and lovely. Oh, we're all children of God and that's all beautiful and stuff, but it's not a complete understanding. There's limitation there. In other words, there are areas of darkness. So what happens if a species or a person goes through life clinging to a limited perspective? And that can also be with respect to a limited perspective about events that happen in your life, your relationship with other people, for example. Even our own childhood and our relationship with that. I mean, and I think we all need to do this, taking a look at my childhood, take a look at your childhood. How did that form your life? How did that create your paradigm identity? Psychologists rightfully say that the first 5 years is sort of the seed form that creates our psychodynamic structure. And then we live within that dynamic the rest of our lives. And that too, okay, I understand that. That's pretty simple. Just take a look at the first 5 years. But how long have I been doing this? Over 50 years. I've been reflecting on that. And I still get new insights, deeper understandings. And it's kind of like, oh my God, I didn't really realize that about my childhood or my relationship with my parents or my family, my brother, my sister, whatever. And it just doesn't stop. Point being, that as we go through our lives, inevitably, the darkness fades. It's a long process. It may not even happen in this one incarnation. But ultimately, God's light shines through any darkness. Even the darkness that, see, when you have relativity, when you have a universe, when you have the manifestation of the universe, and there are beings within that, there's darkness in the awareness of individuals. But even we can get even in the most cosmic sense. The Mahayuga, it cycles. We go through the 4 yugas, and then we go back into the dissolution of the universe, and then manifestation again. So within the dissolution of the universe, we could say that God's light has shined through any darkness. So isn't it kind of a nicer, in a way to hold that universal truth, really, in a simpler way? If we're going through a hard time, if this is dark, if that's dark, if this is difficult, well, God's light will ultimately shine through. Oh, that's a relief, And there's truth to it. But the real key to evolution is ever increasingly deeper understandings, standing under the superficial paradigms that we cling to as our notions of truth, going deeper under that, to that one thing that is the source of everything, you see? So I can understand why, like even the Bible quotes, you read them, and on a surface level, they're very beautiful, But what do they really mean? And how many people really want to try to fathom it on its depth? Even take something like Hinduism, Vedic knowledge, what have you. Particularly in the West. We see it all the time. People get onto it. Westerners get onto it, and wow, it's really profound and it's really beautiful. And so they create what do? They create a paradigm identity around it, a notion of understanding of what it's about. And that notion of understanding is very limited. It's a paradigm identity. It's simplistic. But then they read any Vedic text and it's like, oh, I get it. I call that the I get it syndrome. Because it's intellectualized, it's a concept. But it almost gets to the point, in a sense, you could say, it's to some degree, you might even say there's no humility around it. Okay, I get it. I understand it. And that's a paradigm identity. It's not really the knowledge of Vedic knowledge, and the unfathomability of it, the paradoxical nature of it. So you see, there's something I call the I get it syndrome. Oh yeah, okay, I read that and I get it, and I get that, and okay, I get it. In any part of the Vedic literature I get, or I can figure it out, and okay, I get it. It fits my paradigm identity. But that's not it. And see, that's one part of the beauty of people that grew up with this knowledge. And then the question becomes, how profound was the level of understanding of that knowledge that they grew up in? But to my experience, and it's not across it, let me put it this way, to my experience, it's easier to find individuals who grew up in India in a family that had a very profound level of understanding. And so what happens then is that the humility, the wisdom, the deeper understanding of Vedic knowledge becomes more natural for them. They're more accustomed to it. And they become wiser. And like I'm fond of saying, humility is the flip side of wisdom. And really honestly, I'd have to say it's just a handful of people in my life that I've met. And I think they're, well, just saying it off the cuff here, I think they're all Indian. But people who have a really beautiful and deep appreciation for the profundity of the whole thing. And they're not, and even though they may have a paradigm that they live by that's not completely comprehending the whole thing, because it's incomprehensible anyway, but nevertheless, they hold the humility and the understanding of the unfathomability of the whole thing. And they're beautiful to talk to. You feel the wisdom and the simplicity, because after all, it's just all so simple. You know, changing the subject. Now Donald Trump and all the Republicans are talking about the golden age and how they're bringing about the golden age. And that's great. I mean, again, that's fine. But, you know, we've been talking about the golden age coming for decades before anybody had any thought that Donald Trump would run for president. My goodness. It's the age of enlightenment. And the problem is that now if I talk about the age of enlightenment or the golden age, people think I'm talking about Trump and kind of linking me to that paradigm understanding of the golden age. But as I've always said, I've been saying this for decades. The age of enlightenment, the golden age is coming, and now's the time. 2026, and there it starts to transition. We've been saying this for a long, long time. But I also said that who's ever in power during that time, when all of a sudden it truly becomes like a golden age, what are they going to do? They're going to pat themselves on the back and they're going to say, see, we finally figured it out. We knew how to do it. We did it. It's a golden age, and aren't we great? That's really not the way it works. It's a little bit like saying we start eating oatmeal for breakfast every morning, and there you go, the sun rose. I mean, it's ridiculous. You know, eating oatmeal every morning or having a certain political perspective isn't what makes the sun rise. There's a natural cycle. There's a cycle in nature, you see, and we're coming upon that rising sun. But that doesn't mean we're indifferent to the different political viewpoints. A healthy political viewpoint and the phase transition can come about relatively smoothly with little bumps in the road, of course. That's how it works. But if the wrong paradigm is embraced, it comes about through an Armageddon, a complete destruction, nuclear war, or whatever. But the coming of the golden age is an inevitability. And what we're really about, what Mount Soma is about, is trying to create what? Raising a level of consciousness. What's that? What does that mean? A clearer grasp, a clearer, deeper, more profound, more significant, more accurate, more mature, if you want to say it, relationship with that thing which is just so simple. And as we do that, as we raise the level of consciousness, then we live more and more in harmony with nature. And by virtue of that, the transition occurs much more smoothly. And if we perpetuate that connection, which is what the purpose of Mount Soma will be when the construction is completed, then it's maintained. Why? Why? Because we're enlivening our wakefulness to the perfection that dwells within that self-interacting dynamic of oneness that's called the Veda, the source of all life, the source of all existence. So as you study these things, as you work with these things, it's really important to not lose sight of the simplicity of the whole thing. Consciousness interacts with itself, creates this field of perfection. It wells up and manifests existence. People lose themselves to little paradigm identities with little structures or perspectives that are contained within that complexity, little simplistic models, if you will. Each of those has within it a component of darkness. That darkness is limitation. That causes suffering, and the whole thing stops working very well. But in time, God's light shines through any darkness. It just dissolves away. Why? Because it's not supported by nature. And that's it in a nutshell. Scotty, anything else?
No.
I think it's really important to just leave it there and get comfortable with it. And we need to be careful not to turn that into a simple little paradigm identity. And then we're off and running. Echoes of truth, perceived as truth. Hold truth at bay. Okay, thanks for listening. That's all for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk with you again next week.